Welcome to the Real Story channel. In the small Nigerian village of Ibadan, it was a hot and muggy evening. John, a local fisherman, was desperate to catch some fish to provide for his family. Times had been tough lately, and his usual fishing spots hadn't been fruitful. As he walked home after another unsuccessful day, he passed by the path that led to the forbidden river on the village's edge. The villagers all avoided that river, believing it to be cursed and haunted by evil spirits. However, John began to question whether these were just superstitions. He wondered if the fish in the forbidden river were plentiful precisely because nobody dared to disturb them. After contemplating for a few minutes, John made up his mind. Under the cover of nightfall, he decided to try his luck there. He believed that if he was careful and quiet, nobody would ever find out that he had gone against the village taboos. As dusk settled, John took his fishing spear and woven basket and headed for the forbidden river. He navigated the overgrown path, swatting away flies and mosquitoes along the way. The full moon provided enough light for him to see without stumbling over roots and rocks. When John arrived at the riverbank, he was captivated by its serene and beautiful appearance. The water was clear and sparkling under the moonlight, and lush plants and flowers adorned the banks. The sounds of frogs croaking and insects chirping filled the air. Perhaps there were no evil spirits after all, he thought. John found a flat rock to sit on and cast his fishing spear into the shallows. To his delight, he felt a tug on the line. He reeled in a large, plump fish. Over the next few hours, the fish kept biting incessantly. John was ecstatic as he hauled them in, filling his basket to the brim. By the time the moon was high overhead, he had caught more than enough fish for several hearty meals. Satisfied with his decision to explore the forbidden river, John decided it was time to head home before the sun rose and people started questioning his whereabouts. As he gathered his belongings to leave, a melodic voice called out from the water, "Hello there, leaving so soon?" John peered at the river but couldn't see anyone. Nervously, he replied, hello, who's there?" A splash followed, and a beautiful woman with long flowing hair and seashells covering her breasts emerged from the water. From the waist down, her body transformed into that of a large fish, shimmering under the moonlight. John gasped and stumbled backward. You're a mermaid," he stammered. Mermaids were creatures of myth, according to village legends. Yet here one was right before his eyes. The mermaid smiled warmly and confirmed his observation. "Yes, I am, and these waters are my home. I've been watching you fish all night. You're quite talented." John hesitated, both fascinated and unnerved. "Oh well, thank you. I should really be getting home, though." But the mermaid pleaded, "Wait, I so rarely get to speak with humans. Please stay and talk with me for a while." Despite his better judgment, John found himself compelled by her beauty and enchanting singing voice. He sat back down on the rock and agreed, all right, we can talk for a bit." The mermaid's face lit up, and she swam closer, resting her arms on a nearby rock near John's feet. "Tell me about your village and your people." So, John found himself describing life in the village, talking about the simple mud huts people lived in, the goats and chickens families raised, and the small vegetable gardens they tended. He mentioned the daily rhythms of life, governed by the rising and setting sun. The mermaid listened intently, occasionally asking questions. John began to relax in her presence. She seemed friendly, and it was nice to have someone to chat with. After John had talked for a while, the mermaid commented, "Your village sounds lovely, but lonely. Don't you ever wish you could leave and see the world?" John shrugged and replied, "I suppose so sometimes, but my family needs me, so this is where I belong." The mermaid swished her glittering emerald tail lightly in the water as she gazed at John with her head tilted. "You're loyal and true. I admire that in a human. What is your name?" John replied, "John." The mermaid repeated, "Amaros. That's a lovely name." John thanked her, and there was a pause. Amaros seemed to consider something, and John shifted on his rock, wondering if he should head home before his family woke up. But before he could make his excuses to leave, Amaros spoke again. "John, I have an offer for you. It gets very lonely here with only the fish for company. I believe you and I could be great friends. We got along so well talking tonight. I'd like for you to come live with me underwater and keep me company always." John's eyes widened. The idea of living underwater was such an unexpected possibility. His mind spun as he tried to comprehend this offer from the mythical creature gazing up at him expectantly. Noticing John's stunned silence, Amaros hurried to add, "You would have access to all the fish you could ever want to eat down there. I know your village has been struggling. Here with me, you'd never go hungry again. And think of the adventures we could have. I would show you the beauty and wonder of my world. We would never be lonely again." Her words painted a tempting picture in John's mind, but how could he possibly leave his family and his entire life behind to dwell underwater? I'm flattered," John stammered, "but my place is here on land with my people." Amaros's face fell for a moment, her lower lip quivered, but then her lovely features hardened into a scowl. Her eyes bore fiercely into John's as he leaned away, suddenly remembering the sinister legends surrounding this river. "I offered you a gracious gift," Amaros said, her voice now low and threatening, devoid of the melodic tone. "But if you will not come willingly, you leave me no choice." Before John realized what was happening, the mermaid lashed her tail angrily, splashing him with river water. As soon as the cold liquid touched his skin, his limbs grew numb and clumsy. He tried to stand up and run, but his legs collapsed under him like rubber. He fell hard onto the muddy riverbank. Amaros swam swiftly toward him through the shallows, her beautiful maiden-like form contrasting with her wild and predatory eyes. John attempted to crawl away, but his arms were useless and weak. All he could do was flop helplessly as Amaros grabbed him and dragged him into the water. He tried to cry out, but only gurgled as the river filled his mouth. The mermaid clutched John tightly and dove down into the depths as the forbidden river swallowed him. Looking up, John saw the moon's light receding on the surface above. He tried again to free himself from Amaros's grip, but she held him fast in her webbed hands. John's lungs burned for air as the mermaid pulled him down through the water at surprising speed. Just when he felt like he could hold his breath no longer, they emerged into an underwater cavern with a small opening to the river above. John gasped and choked until he could breathe again. He lay weak and soaked on the rocky cavern floor. Amaros's wild anger seemed to have passed, and she now regarded John with calm determination. "This is my home," she said. "Here is where you'll stay now, too. We will get to know each other very well." My friend June's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what had just transpired. The mermaid possessed powers and magic that he couldn't comprehend, but she didn't appear immediately inclined to kill him. Jun decided that his best course of action was to play along and pretend to cooperate until he could formulate an escape plan. Over the next several days, John remained trapped in the underwater cavern with Omos the mermaid. She brought him fish and river plants to eat and attempted to engage him in conversation, asking about his childhood and life in the village. John gave brief and vague answers, not wishing to encourage her delusion of friendship. Whenever Omos left to hunt or explore, John desperately searched the cavern for a means of escape or a weapon he could use against her. However, the barren stone walls provided no such means. The opening at the top was out of his reach, and even if he could reach it, he couldn't swim fast enough to escape Omos's aquatic speed and powers. During the nights when Omos slept, John tried rubbing sticks together to make a fire, hoping to create smoke and flames as a distraction. His attempts were futile, and exhausted and discouraged, he eventually passed out on the cold stone. About a week after his capture, John woke up to find Omos watching him closely, her face just inches away. Startled, he recoiled, fearing that this might be the end. However, Omos sighed and expressed her longing for a companion who would accept her true self and embrace life underwater. John held his breath, uncertain of her intentions. Would she kill him for rejecting her repeated offers of friendship? But Omos merely stated that he would eventually accept his place underwater, claiming that the river provided for all their needs. Despite his revulsion, John inwardly resolved to find a way out. He would rather die than remain the mermaid's prisoner forever. As days turned into weeks, John's despair grew. Opportunities for escape were scarce, and Omos kept a close watch on him. His skin grew pale and lifeless from the lack of sunlight, and his clothes deteriorated from constant soaking. The meager diet of fish and plants left him weak. However, he knew he had to be patient and seize any chance that came his way. After nearly 2 months in the underwater prison, that opportunity finally arrived. Omos swam away on a hunting trip, leaving John alone for an extended period. John knew he couldn't endure these conditions much longer, and he feared losing his strength and will to break free. Although his muscles had weakened from disuse, John managed to slowly maneuver himself towards the opening at the top of the cavern. With great effort, he pulled himself up, breaching the surface of the river. The cool night air revived him as he blinked in the darkness, realizing he would have to rely on his sense of touch to make his escape. John cautiously pulled himself out of the water and onto the muddy bank, crawling on hands and knees. With no moonlight to guide him, he had to navigate blindly through thick vegetation. Scratched by thorns and threatened by roots and bushes, John persevered. After what felt like hours, John emerged onto a wider dirt path. It felt vaguely familiar, although his delirious state made it difficult to be certain. He couldn't remember the details, but the path ahead seemed to veer away from the river. Determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the mermaid before her return, John stumbled forward, ignoring the pain in his limbs. As the pale dawn light emerged on the horizon, the dirt path started becoming familiar. The thatched roofs of the village homes soon came into view. Summoning his last bit of strength, John staggered into the village center. The villagers, shocked to see a mud-caked, emaciated, and naked man, froze in astonishment. However, a woman dropped her buckets and cried out, "John!" She recognized him as her son and embraced him warmly. Overwhelmed with relief, John let himself succumb to unconsciousness. Upon awakening in his mother's hut, weak but recovering, John recounted the tale of Omos the mermaid and her river prison. The villagers listened in horror, captivated by the account of the cursed creature that had nearly taken one of their own. John's mother held his hand, tears glistening in her eyes as she realized how close she had come to losing her only son. By the time John finished his story, the entire village was in an uproar. They decided that action must be taken against the mermaid before she harmed anyone else. Men armed themselves with torches, nets, fish spears, and knives, with John leading the way. Determined, they marched toward the forbidden river, intent on finding Omos's cavern prison and destroying her. As they approached the river, the men grew cautious, heeding John's warning about the mermaid's strength and speed in the water. They searched the banks carefully until John recognized the opening of the cavern hidden among the reeds. Several men prepared to dive down, holding torches high in one hand and spears in the other. But before they could jump in, an otherworldly shriek pierced the air, causing them to cover their ears. Omos emerged from the cavern, her grotesque mouth wide open, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Her wild eyes found John standing with the villagers on the bank, and she screamed in rage and betrayal. Terrified, the men staggered back, but John stood firm, emboldened by the support of the villagers. He declared that Omos's friendship was bondage, offering only loneliness and despair. With surprising speed, Omos lunged towards John, but 2 men were prepared with nets. They threw the weighted ropes over the mermaid, pinning her to the bank before she could reach her intended prey. Omos thrashed and wailed but couldn't break free. Stepping forward, John raised a fishing spear above Omos's heart, his hands trembling but resolute. The mermaid's eyes followed the weapon's point as it hovered above her. In a calm voice, John declared, "This ends now." With all his strength, he drove the spear down, and Omos let out a final shriek that shook the trees. The men carried her lifeless body back to the village to be burned on a pyre. As they watched the flames consume the body of the creature that had held him captive for so long, it was hard for John to believe she was truly gone. In the days that followed, he regained his strength, surrounded by the support of his family and the village. They celebrated his return and the defeat of the mermaid's curse. John returned to his fishing, making sure to avoid the forbidden river. He would never forget the evil that lurked there beneath the water. But the mermaid, Omos, would no longer haunt his people. Her lonely spirit was banished, allowing the villagers to live in peace along the river's edge. Thus, the fisherman returned home safely, escaping the clutches of the evil mermaid. Though she tempted him with promises of friendship and provisions, he knew that such gifts always come at a price. In the end, evil cannot help but reveal itself. But with courage and community, darkness can be overcome, and light will rise again.